All right, guys, it is pretty late in the evening, probably about 7 p.m. This is Saturday, May 27th, 2023. So I haven't done a video in a while, so I thought I'd give you guys just a verbal update, because boy, have I got some news. So I haven't done much to my wife's 55 four-door because I've been working on my two-door hardtop 55 because it had an issue. So I had to basically work on it out of necessity. Now, some of you guys have been watching the channel long enough know my two-door hardtop 55. I haven't really been focusing on it, even though it's very close to being done. I just didn't want to mess with it until it got closer to February of 2024 when Daryl Starbird's indoor car show was coming around. I was planning on putting it in the bigger part of the show with a display on stands with lights and mirrors under it and show it off underneath. So I didn't want to drive it much because I didn't want to rock chip up the bottom of it and that kind of stuff. But I do like about every week or so to start it up and at least drive it around my housing addition at low speed just to keep the fluids circulated and everything. So I come out here 2 days ago and I went to start the car and it didn't want to start. I just put a brand new Street Demon carburetor on this about 2 weeks ago. So it didn't want to start, and I cranked and cranked and cranked, and I ended up pumping the throttle pedal probably 20 times, and then it finally started and ran just fine. So I drove to the gas station up here, I got me a Gatorade, and then I come back and made a circuit around my housing addition at low speed, and it throttled fine. Like if I goosed it, it went. I mean, it was fine. So I come back into the garage and I shut it off and I let it set about an hour. Now, those Street Demon carburetors have been known. I've had one before brand new and never had an issue with it, and I love those carburetors. They've been known to have an issue with the accelerator pump circuit on them. When you take one apart, they actually have a plastic tube connecting the accelerator pump housing to the squirter. Those have been known to either that hose comes off or it's loose, so you get a really weak, if not any at all, of a pump shot. So it was kind of why I thought that's maybe what's wrong with that brand new carburetor. That tube is off of there or it's loose and it's not allowing me to have much of a pump shot. So I took the carburetor off, I took it outside, put it on one of my tables, and I take it apart and I see a number in the base plate that said 1901, and I already knew that is a 625 CFM carburetor, and I thought I ordered a 750. There was two reasons I ordered a new carburetor for my hardtop. For one, I wanted a 750 CFM because this is a 406 cubic inch small block. I had a 650 Speed Demon on it before. That I actually bought it for a 350 because I was putting a 350 in the hardtop first. Then I ended up building a 406. So anyway, I wanted a 750, but that 650 Speed Demon had a little issue with the metering block, and like it felt like something was in there. So that was the two main reasons I wanted a new carburetor anyway. But anyway, I ended up ordering the wrong carburetor. So when I see that number, I get mad. The first thing I think is Summit sent me the wrong carburetor. So I got the box down off the shelf and it says 1901 625. And then I go in and I look at my invoice. And I always take a picture with my cell phone off the computer screen. And that was what I put in the cart, was the 625. Because I was comparing prices between the 625 and the 750. Because I was going to buy a 625 CFM 1901 model number for my wife's 55 hardtop. I was actually going to have two of the same carburetor, just a 750 and a 625. They only make that Street Demon in a 625 and a 750. But I bought the wrong one. So I was a little upset over that. Not really the end of the world, because the 625 CFM, I just pretty much bought it sooner than later. I guess I can look at it that way for my wife's 55 four-door project, because I'm just putting a little 305 HO in her car. So that'll be a perfect carburetor for that. So at that point, I don't have the money to buy another carburetor, so I decided I would get the 650 Speed Demon back off the shelf that I just took off a couple weeks ago, and I was going to tear into that metering block and see if I could figure out if it could be fixed. Now, what had happened to this carburetor is I bought that carburetor brand new from Summit back in probably 2012, and it had been stored in my house in the box the whole time. It was brand new. So back when I got this car first running, probably, I don't know, 2 years ago, I went to tune the engine with a vacuum gauge. I always set my metering screws with a vacuum gauge. And when I got to this one, this left side rear one right here, There's 4 of them on this particular carburetor. Some carburetors just have them in the front. But anyway, this one has 4. When I got to this one, I couldn't turn the screw. The screw was seized in there. So I gave it a heave-ho with a flat blade screwdriver, and it made a crack sound, but it did come loose. And when I was turning it with the vacuum gauge, it wasn't changing, like it wasn't moving. So I knew something was wrong. So I took the metering screw out, and the tip was broke off of it. Now I took the bolt off, and then I took the metering block off, and I tapped on it, and I got the piece out. And they match up perfectly, so there's not like a third piece. But when I went to put the new screw in there, the metering screw, it only goes about halfway, and it didn't want to screw in the rest of the way. So I had to force it. And, you know, you really don't want to do anything like that with a metering screw. So anyway, I had to. So anyway, it really wasn't changing much. It was moving the needle, but not very much, not like the others. So I still felt like something was in there. So I took it back apart, and I took the screws back out, and I blew air through it. I've got an air blower that I had this little bitty tiny rubber cone that I can put on the end of my air blower, and it's a real small tip. So I can precisely blow out little bitty tiny orifices in carburetors very well with it. And when I blow air through this left side metering plate, I wasn't getting much air out of it, but I was getting a lot out of the other side. So at that point, I'm like, okay, something's in this metering plate, something's stuck in there. So what I was kind of thinking was it's either a piece of aluminum from drilling and tapping, or, you know, something stuck in there, or maybe the tumbler media from when they polish the parts from the factory, maybe that's in there. So I went ahead and put it back together, and I drove the car and ran it for that long until up to 2 weeks ago when I finally bought the other carburetor. So when I found out this 625 was a 625, not a 750, I decided I would put my 650 Speed Demon on there, back on there. So before I put it back on, I took it back apart. And I blew the air through the metering plate again, and now I'm getting the same amount of air. So whatever was in it is not in there now, because I'd come to the realization, I looked around on the internet, I was going to buy a brand new Demon metering block, secondary metering block. You can't buy the metering block by itself for a Demon. Don't know why. They do not interchange with a Holly. They may bolt on and they may look the same, but they will not work. I read up about it a long time ago when I first had this issue, when I first got the car running. But it was something about 3 passage versus 2 or something. I don't remember. But anyway, you can't buy just the metering block. So I decided that I was going to pull the plug out of the top of that metering block. If you've ever looked at a metering block, they have what looks like miniature freeze plugs in the top. So I was going to pull that plug out, and you can buy those plugs. So I was going to pull it out and see if there was something in there and try to get it out. But I didn't have to pull it out, because now blowing air through it, there's nothing in there. So at that point, I put the carburetor back together, and I come back in, bolted it on the car. I go to start the car, I'm not getting any fuel. So Houston, we have a problem. So this particular carburetor, I bought this fuel line and all this stuff with a fuel gauge on it, fuel pressure gauge. I didn't have a fuel pressure gauge for that carburetor, so I didn't know, you know, I couldn't read anything on it. So now that I cranked and cranked and cranked and I'm not getting any fuel up here, that gauge didn't come off 0. So kind of figured probably got a fuel pump issue. So the next thing I checked after I found out I probably got a fuel pump issue, this is what you always should check, you small block Chevy guys with a block mount fuel pump. You need to pull your dipstick and make sure that your crankcase is not full of fuel. So I pulled the engine oil dipstick and checked that, no problems there. So next thing I look at is the block mount fuel pump. I use an over-the-counter O'Reilly's Precision, I think is the brand, fuel pump. It is, I tell them it's like a 1977 Chevy pickup, half-ton, 350. Anyway, there is no return or vent tube on it. It's just an in and an out. That's it. So that's the fuel pumps I always run, and I never have issues with them, other than when I first got this car running, my Demon was flooding out. It was spitting fuel out of the vent tube. Come to find out, it was reading 8.2 psi on the fuel gauge, and I just thought that gauge was wrong. And anyway, come to find out, it wasn't wrong. That stock fuel pump was putting out 8.2 psi. That's ridiculous. So Anyway, I took the pump off, took it back to O'Reilly's, swapped it out, told them it was putting out too much pressure. They warrantied it. I come back and put the other pump on, and it was putting out 8.2 psi. So what I guess I'm figuring out is some of the later made fuel pumps, they've got too stiff a spring in them. So that's why I had to end up putting a fuel pressure regulator on a stock fuel pump, which is dumb. But anyway, the thing about a stock mount fuel pump for a block, like for over-the-counter fuel pump, is if I'm on power tour or something with this car and a fuel pump goes out, I'll be able to go get an Uber or whatever to a parts store and get the fuel pump. It's not a special fuel pump, you know what I mean, like a Holley or a Edelbrock fuel pump. It's just an over-the-counter, like any of them from Napa, AutoZone, O'Reilly's, any of them will work, Advance, you know what I mean? So that's why I did that with that in mind. Now this fuel pump, when I looked down there, the outer crimp ring on the fuel pump, there was dried fuel residue all around it. So there's no leaks under the car. Every time I drive the car or pull it out to let it warm up, I always look at the floor to see if I have a leak on something. So I haven't had a fuel leak, but I don't know if it's sucking air, or that's kind of what I'm thinking, is maybe it's sucking a little bit of air and that's why it's kind of locking it and not letting a bunch of fuel up there or something. I don't know. Now the fuel pump is off the car. It's in the bed of my truck airing out, and I'm going to go over there tomorrow and swap it out. Hopefully they've got one in stock and I don't have to order it in, because it is the weekend and I might have to wait till Monday or Tuesday. But anyway, that's where I'm at on the car. So I ended up putting the 650 Speed Demon back on it, which in my personal opinion, I would much rather have a 750 CFM on a 406 cubic inch small block. Just me. I have run 750s on 350s, but back when I used to street race and drag race all the time, it was always 750 double pumper for me. But about the last 15 or so years, I've gotten to where I prefer the vacuum secondary, because I mainly street drive anymore. So anyway, it's kind of funny, because before I bought that Street Demon carburetor from Summit, I was actually going to buy an ATM carburetor from ATM Innovations. It's a bunch of guys that have gotten together that used to work for Quick Fuel, and they're a bunch of real-time drag racers. And anyway, they started building their own carburetor, and it's called an ATM. I've been seeing some of the channels I'm subscribed to using it on their street cars and stuff. So they were impressed with the carburetor right out of the box, bolting it on. It was really close to where it needed to be. So I was like, hell, I'm going to try one. So I called ATM. Well, unbeknownst to me, they don't have vacuum secondaries. They only have double pumpers, and I didn't want a double pumper. So if I was drag racing and street racing a lot, I would have gotten one. But I'm more into just street driving, going to car shows, and may go on power tour, maybe drive the Tri-5 Nationals or something in Kentucky. So I just wanted a vacuum secondary. But anyway, I did talk to the guy before I found out they only had double pumpers, and he asked me all kinds of questions about my car, which was very nice, because sometimes guys just don't know what carburetor to get. So my general rule of thumb, if I have like a 383 small block stroker or a 400, I automatically get a 750. He asked me what car I was working on, because he wanted the idea of what it weighed, and he wanted to know the rear gear ratio, cam specs, torque converter stall, and compression ratio. So that's some pretty interesting stuff to get asked. And after I give him all that, he recommended a 650 for my 406. So that's pretty interesting. So then I found out all they had was a double pumper. He gave me a part number. And when I looked at it online, after I hung up the phone with him and looked at it online, I noticed it was a double pumper, and they didn't have a vacuum secondary on their page. So I just decided, why buy a 650 when I've already got a 650? So anyway, that's how that went. But the actual Street Demon 750 would have been a great carburetor for that. And even if I put a 750 on, it'd still probably be fine. You know what I mean? But that's where I'm at. So bottom line is, I put my old carburetor back on, and now I need to change a fuel pump on it. But I have really messed up the car as to where I was going to show it, in an indoor show all weekend event, and put it on stands with lights and mirrors under it. I ain't going to worry about that crap now, because I jacked up the car the other day right in the center of the frame, the crossover there on the frame underneath. Now I usually use a bath towel out of the house, and I fold it up real thick into a big square, and that's a perfect cushion. But I was too lazy to go in the house and get it, and I grabbed a buffing pad, a little foam buffing pad off the wall over there that's been out here for probably 10 years, and I put it on top of the floor jack, and then I jacked the car up. Well, unbeknownst to me, until I let the car down, it actually went through that dry rotted foam pad, and the metal claws on that thing dented my frame and chipped the paint all to crap on it. So that frame cradle's gonna have to be touched up and repainted. And also, when I pulled the fuel line off that Street Demon, it has a barbed fitting, and I was yanking like hell trying to get that hose off there. Fuel shot everywhere. Went all over my car, all over me. It went on my inner fenders, both of them, and stained the paint. The paint on my inner fenders is a single stage matte black. There is no sanding and buffing, and there is no compounding it out. That is a repaint. So as far as I'm concerned, with the work that it now has to be, rework has to be done, the inner fenders have to come out of the car, and that's going to be a big job. The front clip will have to come off the car. I ain't doing that. So I'm just going to roll with the stained up inner fenders. There's just a few spots on each one, but you know, going into the heavier competition part of that show with the big display and all that stuff, showing off the bottom side of the car and everything, they're going to see that. So I am still going to put the car in the show coming up in 2024, February at Star Wars at Tulsa, but I'm just going to enter the regular show with the other Tri-5s. I'm going to have the hood up, trunk up, and maybe the window down so people can see inside, but I'm not going to worry about stands and carpet and stanchions and all that crap. So I'm just going to go ahead, finish the car, put it together, and drive the crap out of it. So that's what you're going to see coming up the next week or so, is me working on the hardtop and finishing it up. I'm just going to basically start just driving it almost every day. If it ain't raining, I'll drive my car. And I don't care if it's to Walmart, the grocery store, I'm going to drive my car. If it gets chipped up, dinged up, scratched up, I can fix it. You know what I mean? Unless it's underneath, and then I don't care anymore. But anyway, guys, that's what's coming up. I got hardtop videos coming. Hopefully get the hood painted and installed, get the flippers done, get the trunk upholstered, finish up all this other little crap. The sway bars need to be put on. I got to paint them and put them on. And there's a couple other little tidbits I need to do to the car, but that's the plan. And then one of the videos you're going to see is me getting out here on Route 66 and driving to Catoosa to the Blue Whale. And that's going to be the very first shakedown run of the car. Now, I've drove the car and put miles on it, but I have not taken it out on an open highway and got it up to 65, 70, 75 miles an hour yet. I think 50 is the highest I've went. Maybe 55 miles per hour is the highest I've been, just on these little paved side roads out here. But, so, you know, I need to get a shakedown run under its belt and make sure it's going to be good, drives good, don't have any vibrations, and nothing leaks when I get back after a long trip. So that'll be one video coming up. I don't know when that'll be. And then in other news, I have a buddy that keeps razzing me through text messages. He wants to drag race me, and he's got a square body Chevy truck, a little short bed with a little 355 in it. Pretty stout little truck. I'm the one that put his carburetor on. I timed it and I tuned the carburetor, and I've rode in the truck, so I know how fast the truck is. But for whatever reason, he has not rode in this. He thinks he can outrun my car. I've said it before, I didn't build a race car. I used to drag race. Most of my life I've drag raced. I used to be a hardcore street racer. I have probably, I don't know how much money I lost street racing. I used to work all week, get paid, and go street racing. And I didn't win a whole lot of races, actually, because I was too stupid to put on slicks. So anyway, I used to street race a lot, and then I ended up track racing a lot here at Tulsa Raceway Park. 2 whole seasons we were at that track, me, my cousin, and some of our friends with our street cars. And my cousin and one of our friends worked the same schedule, off one weekend, on the next. So every other weekend we were at Tulsa for 2 whole seasons, unless it rained or something stupid. But man, I tell you what, I've been down that track a lot. Doesn't make me a professional drag racer or anything, but you know, I do know how to drag race, and I do know how to lose money at racing. So anyway, he's wanting to drag race. We're not doing it for money. We're just doing it for fun. But I have talked him into going to the drag strip, and we're going to do a test and tune session. And that way I can properly tune his truck and my car. You know, we get time slips, so I can, you know, tune for mile per hour and stuff. So I'll be able to see if it'll take more timing, be able to see if it'll take more jet, that type of stuff. So that will make a really good video, and hopefully I can get my wife to video it all so I don't have to try to video tune and race, but that will be pretty cool. Again, I'm not making a plan of drag racing a bunch of people. I don't want to drag race my car a bunch, but I would like to take it to the track and at a test and tune and get it fine-tuned. You know what I mean? And I'm curious to see what it'll run. I got an idea what's going to run because I've had quite a few 55s with pretty hot small blocks in them, but I'm pretty sure it's going to outrun his truck. He's never been on a drag strip, and I don't think he's much of a drag racer. He's a younger guy, but I think he's probably watched Fast and Furious too many times, so he probably thinks it runs 10s or something, and he's going to really freak out when he takes it to the drag strip on street tires and figures out how it goes. So anyway, guys, that's where I'm at, and that's what's coming up this next week. So hopefully you're on board. Appreciate y'all watching and tuning in, so stay tuned.